Right, let's get one thing straight. The world of military aviation is a bit like a very, very expensive pub argument. It's full of big talkers, lads with deep pockets and a lot of posturing. You have the Americans swaggering in with their F-22s and F-35s, jets so expensive they're practically made of gold-pressed latinum and unicorn tears. Then you have the Russians and the Chinese always lurking in the corner, looking moody and claiming their machines can do loop-the-loops around everyone else. And then, quietly sipping a sensible, moderately priced beer in the corner, is Sweden. Nobody ever pays much attention to Sweden until now. Because on a day that started like any other, news emerged from a closed-door NATO exercise that sent a jolt through the entire military establishment. The Swedish jet had done something, guys, impossible. The initial reports were just whispers, fragments of data leaking from the highly classified debriefings of Operation Arctic Challenge. It was the kind of rumor you dismiss at first, like someone telling you a Lada has just won the Monaco Grand Prix. But then the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Generals who usually have faces like granite were seen looking pale. So what really happened out there? Over the frozen expanse of the Arctic. How did this little Swedish terrier manage to bite the ankles off the world's biggest, baddest Rottweiler? Well, it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a lucky shot. It was a calculated, brilliant, and frankly terrifying display of what happens when you think differently. The exercise, codenamed Arctic Challenge 2025, was designed to test NATO's cutting-edge air defenses. A squadron of F-22 Raptors were the aggressors. Their job, be invisible, slip past the net, destroy key targets. Defending this airspace, Eurofighter Typhoons, French Rafales, and one squadron of the Swedes. The American pilots in their Raptors would have been feeling pretty smug. Flying an F-22 is like being given the keys to God's own chariot. You are faster, you are higher, and most importantly, you are invisible, or so you think. The Gripen, however, didn't play by the established rules. While other jets were trying to find the Raptors using their own powerful radars, a bit like shouting in a library to find someone who's whispering, the Gripen did something clever. It used its advanced sensor suite, not just its own radar, but a whole network of systems, including a revolutionary new infrared search and track, or IRST system. This Sky pod doesn't look for radar reflections, it looks for heat. And even a stealth fighter, for all its clever angles and radar-absorbent paint, is still a very, very hot piece of machinery. The Gripen, flying low and using the terrain to mask its own signature, essentially listened instead of shouting. It used data links from other jets, from ground stations, even from its wingman, to build a complete picture of the battle space. It was like a detective piecing together clues. While the F-22 was a ghost to traditional radar, it was a blazing bonfire to the Gripen's sensitive thermal images. The Swedish pilot didn't get a fuzzy, intermittent blip. They got a crystal clear heat signature. And once you can see something, you can target it. The Gripen pilot, using this network of information, was able to get into a firing position without ever turning on his own main radar, which would have given his position away instantly. It was the perfect ambush. The kill itself was brutal in its efficiency. The Gripen, having tracked the Raptor silently, achieved a first look. First shot, first kill. It fired a simulated meteor missile, a ridiculously advanced weapon that the Gripen is uniquely designed to exploit to its maximum potential. By the time the F-22 pilot's warning system screamed to life, it was already over. The missile was in the air and unstoppable. The Raptor, the multi-billion-dollar ghost, had been exercised by a jet that costs a fraction of the price. It wasn't just a kill, it was an intellectual assassination. The Swedes hadn't just brought a knife to a gunfight, they'd brought a neurotoxin. The shockwaves were instantaneous. The world, or at least the part of it that wears uniforms and worries about geopolitics, collectively gasped. This wasn't just a minor upset. This was the equivalent of a Sunday League football team turning up at Wembley and thrashing Manchester City 5-0. For decades, the entire strategic doctrine of Western air power has been built on one simple, eye-wateringly expensive idea: stealth, the ability to be invisible to radar. The F-22 Raptor, the apex predator of the skies, was the ultimate expression of this idea. It was designed to be a ghost, a phantom that could kill you before you even knew it was there. And the little Swedish jet, a machine designed with a completely different philosophy, had just proven that the ghost could be seen. And not just seen, but hunted. the foundations of air combat strategy didn't just tremble, they cracked. Imagine the scene in the NATO command bunker. The air is thick with the smell of stale coffee and sheer panic. On the big screen, they'd have watched the simulation unfold. Blue icons representing the friendly NATO forces, moving with confidence. Among them, the ghostly, almost untouchable icons of the F-22s. Then a single, plucky red icon, the Gripen, does something utterly unexpected. It doesn't run. It doesn't hide. It turns, it dances, and then a simulated missile lock, a kill. The blue icon vanishes. Silence. Someone probably dropped a biscuit in their tea. The king of the sky had been dethroned, not by a bigger, more powerful king, but by a clever, nimble, and infuriatingly efficient little prince from the north. The game had changed. To truly appreciate what the Gripen accomplished, you need to understand just how different it is from the jets it defeated. Think of the American F-22 Raptor as a heavyweight boxer. It's enormous, packed with muscle, designed to deliver a knockout from long range. Now, look at the Saab Gripen. If the F-22 is a heavyweight boxer, the Gripen is a nimble, wiry martial artist. It's small, it's light. It has a single, reliable GE engine. Same family as the FA-18 Super Hornet. It wasn't built for all aspects stealth. Instead, the Swedes focused on being clever. The Gripen has a small radar cross-section, harder to spot than an older F-16, but not true stealth like the F-22. It's semi-stealthy and highly agile, hard to find, harder to hit. The difference in philosophy is stark. The Gripen's superpower is a net-centric approach, sensor fusion and data links. It doesn't need invisibility if it knows exactly where you are and can guide a missile from over the horizon. So, to really get the Gripen, you have to understand Sweden itself. For centuries, Sweden has been shaped by fierce independence and a philosophy of armed neutrality. Imagine being a relatively small country sharing your backyard with a very large, historically unpredictable bear. Yeah, Russia. You can't hope to match the bear in size or strength, right? So you've got to be smarter. You have to be like a porcupine. Prickly, tough to attack, and honestly, just not worth the trouble. This kind of thinking, it's baked into every nut and bolt of their military hardware. The doctrine is called the dispersal strategy, and the Gripen, well, it's the ultimate expression of that idea. Oh, and the name Gripen itself means the griffin, body of a lion, head of an eagle. It's a perfect symbol for strength on the ground and dominance in the air. The Swedish Air Force always knew they couldn't afford vast, sprawling air bases. So they came up with a system where their Air Force could operate from, well, pretty much anywhere. Literally. The Gripen was engineered from the ground up to take off and land on short, 800-meter stretches of ordinary public roads, and it's built to be serviced by a small team of conscripts with minimal training using pretty simple tools. A team of 6 people can refuel and rearm a Gripen with air-to-air missiles in less than 10 minutes. That's just an absolutely bonkers capability. While other air forces are stuck on their vulnerable super bases, the Swedish Gripens can scatter across the country, becoming an impossible-to-find pop-up air force. Hiding out in forests, operating from motorways, appearing and disappearing. This philosophy of rugged self-sufficiency extends to the jet's design. It has to withstand brutal Scandinavian winters, operate in snow and ice, and function far from the comfort of a heated hangar. The news of the Gripen's success didn't stay within the confines of military circles for long. It erupted onto the global stage, sending shockwaves through defense ministries, corporate boardrooms, and international alliances. For countries agonizing over which fighter jet to buy, the decision became more complicated. Nations in Asia, nations in South America, nations in Eastern Europe who couldn't afford the astronomical price tag of an F-35 suddenly saw a viable combat-proven alternative. A world map with arrows from Sweden pointing to potential buyers. The Gripen wasn't just the budget option anymore, it was the smart option. Saab's phone lines must have been ringing off the hook. For the United States, this was a wake-up call of monumental proportions. The entire export strategy for their defense industry, particularly for the F-35, was predicated on its supposed invincibility. This single exercise had tarnished that image. Potential buyers were now asking difficult questions. If the Gripen can do this, what's to stop the Russians or the Chinese from developing similar technologies and tactics? The reaction from Russia and China was one of quiet satisfaction. Their state media reported the story with thinly veiled glee. It confirmed their long-held argument that the West's over-reliance on overly complex, high-cost stealth technology was a strategic blunder. The Gripen's success validated other design philosophies and offered a clear roadmap on how to defeat America's most prized assets. It was a gift, wrapped and delivered by the Swedes. For the rest of the world, it was a reminder that innovation isn't the sole property of superpowers. The Gripen's victory was a victory for the underdog, a global symbol of how brains can sometimes triumph over brawn. Now, you might be sitting there in your comfortable armchair thinking, this is all very interesting, but it's about fighter jets and generals. What on earth has it got to do with me? And that's a fair question. The answer is a lot more than you think. First, let's talk about your money. As a taxpayer in a Western country, a significant chunk of your hard-earned cash goes towards defense. For decades, you've been funding planes like the F-35 on the promise of overwhelming technological superiority. One event in the Arctic sky throws a massive question mark over that value. It forces a public conversation. Keep pouring billions into a single, potentially flawed concept, or invest in a wider, more flexible range of solutions like the Swedes have. This isn't just military strategy, it's national security, which affects your safety. The balance of power is delicate. Perceived unassailable advantage can bring stability, but also arrogance and overreach. If that advantage is shown vulnerable, the world becomes more unpredictable and potentially more dangerous. Adversaries become emboldened. Allies become nervous. That changes dynamics in hotspots like Eastern Europe and the South China Sea. NATO confidence is shaken. For the rest of the world, it was a reminder that innovation isn't the sole property of superpowers. A small nation of 10 million had managed to outthink and outmaneuver the world's largest military power. It demonstrated clever design, smart tactics, and a focused strategy can be a great leveler. So what happens next? The world of military aviation is now split into two distinct periods, before Arctic Challenge 2025 and after. In the before times, the path forward seemed clear. Stealth was king, and the F-35 was its heir apparent. The goal was to make jets that were essentially invisible black holes on radar screens. But the Gripen's performance has shattered that linear thinking. It has shown that there is another way, a path that doesn't rely on making your aircraft invisible, but on making the entire battle space visible to your pilot. It's a fundamental shift from hiding in the dark to turning on a giant all-seeing floodlight. This changes everything for air forces that can't afford a fleet of stealth bombers. The immediate consequence is that the 4.5 generation fighters, Gripen, Typhoon, Rafale, have been given a new lease on life. Previously seen as a stopgap, they are now viewed as credible and vital. Defense planners are realizing that a mixed fleet might be the smartest approach. A few high-end stealth jets for kicking down the door, backed up by a larger number of highly capable, networked, more affordable fighters like the Gripen to control the skies. The underdog now has a defined and respected role in the pack. It's not just the budget option, it's a strategic necessity. This event will inevitably trigger a new arms race, but not one of speed or altitude. This will be an arms race of electrons and algorithms. The focus will shift to electronic warfare, sensor fusion, data links, and artificial intelligence. The question is no longer, can you see me, but can you process information faster than me? Companies like Saab, which specialized in this software-centric approach, are now in an incredibly powerful position. Other manufacturers will scramble to catch up, trying to replicate the Gripen's combat cloud concept. For Sweden, this is a moment of immense national pride and a massive strategic victory. Their unique philosophy of defense has been vindicated on the world stage. The Gripen is no longer just a Swedish or European fighter, it is now a global benchmark for smart, efficient air power. This success will guarantee the future of the Gripen program for decades to come, bringing in export orders that will fund even more advanced development. The little porcupine from the north has shown the world its quills are much longer and sharper than anyone ever imagined. It has proven that you don't need the budget of a superpower to have superpower-level ideas. The underdog has grown a new, very sharp set of teeth. In the end, this single moment over the Arctic represents more than just a military upset. It marks the dawn of a new era in aerial warfare. The age of unquestioned stealth supremacy is over. It didn't end with a bang, but with a clever piece of code and a burst of infrared data. For half a century, design focused on higher, faster, less visible. The Gripen has proven there is another path. The fighter today is the central nervous system of a vast, interconnected web of sensors and weapons. The best pilot is the one who can manage an overwhelming flow of information better than their opponent. The Gripen hasn't made stealth obsolete, but it stripped away its aura of invincibility. It shows that for every multi-billion-dollar measure, there is a clever, cheaper countermeasure. It reintroduces tactical cunning and electronic ingenuity, leveling a playing field that was becoming dangerously unbalanced. The implications will cascade through military thinking for years. It will force a painful but necessary rethink in the halls of the Pentagon and NATO. It will empower smaller nations, giving them a credible means to defend their airspace against more powerful aggressors. It will change how pilots are trained, the weapons they use, and the tactics they employ. The future of air combat will be a hybrid, a complex dance between stealthy penetrators and networked defenders. So the next time you think of Sweden, don't just think of flat-pack furniture and meatballs and family cars. Think of the Gripen. Think of the small, clever nation that looked at the rule book and wrote a new one.